Hi, Aaron here, Ultra One Consulting. First, I want to take a moment to thank you for taking some time out of your day today to spend with me to review this document. I know your time is valuable and you're busy, and so that you took a few moments to spend with me means a lot. So thank you. I created this document because, as you know, in the real estate space, there's a lot out there that's just a lot of platitudes. And having spent the last 8 years in property management and distressed asset real estate, primarily construction, I thought there'd be nice to have something out here that is foundational. That's something that's fundamental that anybody, whether you're an old hat in the industry or somebody new coming up, there's some good reminders in here, and there's just some good basic foundational things that you can apply to your business to make it more successful. And so in that, it's a simple 3-step system. So thank you for joining me, and we'll get started. A little about me. I started my career in operations and leadership over 20 years ago, back in the Air Force. And from there, I went to university, and then I moved into manufacturing, dry dock work, and then I worked at a fish packing plant before moving into real estate. So when I came into real estate, I'd already been in operations and leadership for about 12 years. I came into real estate in 2013, and I started at Westwater Wholesale Properties, which then turned into spin companies later on. And I was a property manager from 2013 through 2017. And then in 2017, I also transitioned over to being general manager of the company through 2021. Coming in 2013, we had 500 assets under management. 400 of those were not the companies, they were turnkey properties for clients. And in that also, we had 100 company-owned assets. And we had a great team, but the problem was there was zero standards, there were no systems, and there were zero processes. And so you had a lot of challenges with just doing the basic fundamentals, providing good services to not only owners, but to the tenants that were living in the homes. So when you have those kind of challenges with no systems, no processes, and no standards, the business starts to go south very quickly. In our case, we had owners that were very upset who wanted to pull assets. We had very angry tenants because nobody was listening to them, whether it be for them checking on their rent being paid or for them to do a maintenance call because they needed service on the house completed. So you had very angry folks. And then from that leads to an unhappy staff because the staff can't win. In this case, because we didn't have any systems in place or procedures, everything was kept on individual notebooks or on individual Excel files, but nothing was really coordinated or together in one co-located place to provide a ease of access of information across the team. And so it was really kind of like everybody was fighting their own fires, but none of them effectively together. So when I came in, I implemented a simple 3-step system in less than 90 days. And we started off with responsive communications because responsive communication is the one way to start getting buyback from everybody, all of your clients in our case. So that was the owners, the applicants, the tenants, and vendors that we utilized. And nobody likes to be on the back burner. Everybody wants to know that they've been heard and that you understand their problem or their challenge. And so in doing this, what this allowed us to do was basically address their concern, and then from there, buy some time to build a solution or find out the information we needed to have to be able to provide them back an actual solution or accurate information. And we did that by then building out a simple Google Sheet. We made a very basic database, and it had basically the asset and its attributes. And then we had who the owner was and the tenants and the tenant contact information. And then we had a note section that let us put in any information on anything about the asset, whether it's a maintenance call, there's a challenge with the tenant, whatever it might be. And so in that, everybody in property management could then go through that document and find anything on any asset. And so if any owner or any tenant called, you could simply go onto the doc, pull it up quickly and efficiently, and know the status of what was going on, whether that be rent collected, a 3-day notice posted, or a maintenance request that went out that needs to be followed up on. It was all there on the doc, and anybody on the team could follow up on that specific task with very little ease and with high accuracy on the information that was there to then push forward. Once we had those things up and running, we moved into actually codifying that into standard operating procedures. And standard operating procedures are critical because what they allow you to do is codify what your expectations are and your boundaries are per task inside the organization. So in this case, I use the property management rental inquiry call / email response script. It's a very simple one, but it really highlights the importance of doing SOPs and having good SOPs. Because what you're doing with this is you're efficiently onboarding somebody who's maybe never done it before. And this lets them know why the script is the way it is, what the goals are of the script. What are we trying to accomplish by having a script for responses on rental inquiries? If you've worked in rental real estate, you understand and know that potential tenants, applicants, will call up and they can take an inordinate amount of your time. And so the goal is to make this a very efficient process, pass the required information that's needed on the asset to the potential applicant, and then also you're pre-qualifying the applicant while they're on the phone because you're giving them the qualification standards. And then you're doing this efficiently because if you're reading through the script, it should literally take you less than 60 seconds to read through the entire script. And then to answer any of their questions, maybe another 30, 40 seconds. And so you're really looking at being able to handle a phone call between 90 seconds and 2 minutes is really the limit. 2 minutes meaning you're hanging up the phone and you're done. And you can get that all across to a brand new hire within 5 minutes of them sitting down, reading this over, going through any questions they have, and then putting them on the phone, showing them in the server where you have all these different ones per property listed that are for rent, and they can go through and just start taking phone calls and working through it. Of course, it takes some time to build that repetition and build that skill set, but this cuts that time down in half because now they have full buy-in on the process and they understand why. And that's huge for anything that you're doing. So implementing these things are responsive communications, our simple system, our leveraging simple systems, and then our SOPs. We were able to go from an unknown collection rate to knowing that we had an 84% collection rate per month. And then from the next 90 days from there, we were able to up that collection rate to 91% of what was billed. And that was huge because before we didn't know. We had zero understanding of where we sat. And if you don't know where you sit, doing rental real estate, you can't then try to pursue those past due rents. You can't put out a 3-day notice because you don't know when the rents came in. You don't know who's missing what. And so this allowed us to then just simply enforce our lease agreement that we had with the tenants and be able to build solution sets with them to collect that past due rent. And it worked to a charm because in the preceding 4 years, we were able to collect $776,000 in recovered rents, roughly $180,000 on average per year. And so as you can see here with the collected QC being what was collected of billed, just the initial, say, rent coming in, and then following it up with our process and procedures, we were able to increase that by 10% easily. And so we went from an average of 88% collected against billed to 98.3% collected against billed. And yes, that made owners much happier, made for much happier tenants because tenants knew where they stood and we were communicating with them when they were having rent challenges. And, obviously the business did a lot better because we were collecting more revenue. In 2016, or towards the end of 2016, the obviously property management was doing great. We were at 99% of collections and occupancy. So basically statistical full collections and occupancy. And that was not the same though for the construction side of the business. In their case, they were still having a lot of challenges. And one of those was that they were going through basically a construction manager every year for the last several years. While property management was speeding up, they were slowly falling down the cliff. And so in 2016, beginning of 2017, the owner came to me and asked if I'd like to take on the challenge of trying to turn construction around. Since I had done such a great job with property management, he wanted to see if I could do it with construction. And I said, of course. So one might ask, what do you do in construction? Well, what construction was supposed to be doing and what we did do, we turned it into a perfection. But what construction does in our case is basically we handled the asset from pre-purchase all the way through the eventual sale of the asset. So we would go out and do initial evaluation, come up with initial estimates on the cost per exit strategy. And then from there, once the asset was acquired, we worked up detailed scopes of work, got bids on those, and then managed the construction project all the way through. And then we would do the final quality control walks on the assets before they were listed for marketing. And then once it was sold, took care of any home inspection repairs, and then made sure the seller was happy, and off the asset went. And so we managed to basically all the touch points from before acquisition all the way through it being processed through the system through its final disposition. So day one showed up. Our biggest problem obviously is velocity in the pipeline. And when you're a distressed asset company or you're a real estate company, your goal is to move assets through. That's how you make money. In our case, we had very long completion times, which when you're holding assets that have leverage on them or have lender money, that becomes a problem very quickly. We were over budget because, as I said before, we weren't scoping the assets correctly. And then poor quality because the standard that was set for the vendor wasn't very high, and the information feedback they were getting was slow. It was very, very slow. And what that turned into was absent vendors, because if you're not going to communicate, then they're not going to work on the asset, which means they're going to go find something else where somebody is going to communicate more frequently with them so they can be productive with their time. So as we did in property management, I came in with a 3-step system and implemented it in less than 90 days. So we started off with responsive communication. That was key. Communication previously had taken our construction managers had taken their time in responding back to vendors or anyone. And so a simple question could take anywhere from a couple of days to a week to be responded back to. And so I changed that to being where responses need to be back in less than 12 hours. And then we took away some of the mandatory things that we had previously set for communication standard, which was, well, everything has to be done through email. And my change to that was, no, everything has to be done through email. We need to find the way that whichever vendor it is, what's their most responsive form of communication. And so some may be email, some may be text, and some may be phone call. And then after that, a summary email may go out after, a text or a phone call that, ties the whole team into being and to understanding what was going on with that asset. Then in doing so, what that did is we took basically things that took 2 weeks because response times on emails or communications were slow. We bought back that time. So things that took 3 weeks now took 3 days. And you can do the math on that, on how quickly that sped up the pipeline. Also in doing so, you have to have an ability to track information and provide that information to be, decentralized across the group. And so what we did is we, again, came back to our simple systems. We built a Google Sheet database, also with a task tracker in it. Excuse me. And what that allowed us to do was to have it one location where all the assets were located at with all their basic information pieces. And then from there, all the tasks that went with that asset, and then any of the contacts that go with that asset. So for instance, if you have a roof, that's one of your tasks, and maybe it just needs to be repaired. So that's in your notes. And then from there, it's who's the roofing company. Or if you're having another vendor do it because it's inside of so many squares, you can have a regular construction guy take care of it. And so anything like that, where it was, a roof, an HVAC, plumbing, electrical, all those tasks would be broken out, and they would have follow-up dates, and they would have a person that was your POC or your point of contact for that task through that vendor. And then that way, whether it was you or somebody else, if the follow-up date hit and you hadn't heard anything back, it was very easy for anybody in the department to reach out to that person and have full confidence in what they were asking, because all the information was right there, which meant everybody, whether it be the owner or anybody in the department or anybody else who looked on that doc, had full situational awareness of what was going on with that asset. And that was huge. And then obviously, once we got those things up and going, we worked on getting in standard operating procedures, because just as before, it's hugely important to be able to easily onboard people. And in our case, with real estate doing construction, you're looking at processing assets through a system. And in our case, because we're touching the asset from pre-acquisition all the way through the acquisition process, construction process, and disposition, the biggest, most important piece for us, and this is why I should pick this SOP particularly, is the initial evaluation of the asset, especially if you're not going to be the one who's going to be touching it. In our case, if it was in state, we touched it. And if it was out of state, we would have somebody else out there taking looks. But we needed to be able to have them communicate the information we needed back, which means making that first touch on the asset a huge value add. so you can do it in one go. With the idea being that if you're going to evaluate this asset, maybe you aren't going to pick it up, but and the chance that you do pick it up, you want to make sure that you've gotten as much information as you can on that asset. And so that way you don't have to go back twice. You have all the information you need to be able to process that asset through based off this first go, at least into a point where you can get a crew out there who's doing standard work and then sending you back, updates on pictures. But for the initial estimates, you want to do it where they're taking not, 40 pictures of an asset, they're taking 400 pictures of an asset. And I can write a detailed scope of work off those pictures. And this SOP specifically details out how somebody would walk that asset, take those pictures, where to look, what information to gather. So that way we can build a full, complete picture of the asset, and we can do it efficiently through pictures and a phone call. And so that's what this allows you to do. It allows you to onboard somebody efficiently and easily, and allows them to facilitate the job at a requisite level of need. And so in our case, obviously you can see here, the results were fantastic. And in 3 years, we increased our revenue by $5.5 million. And we did that through just doing the basics, responsive communication, leveraging simple systems, and good standard operating procedures. And so as you can see here, 2016 before me, they've got roughly 80 rehabs through that year. And 2017, the first year I took over, we did 236. So that's a 156 asset increase, which takes your weekly completions from 1.5 to 4.5. And then as you can see here, we increased every year from there, which totaled us, into $5.5 million in revenue in that 3-year period. And so, no, it's just doing the basics. There wasn't anything fancy in this. There wasn't anything crazy. It was just doing the basics well every single day. That's all it was. And obviously here, the growth slowed down quite a bit, even though the revenue continued to increase. But the growth slowed because obviously you have a team that's only so large and you only have so many resources. So that kind of caps you out there. However, the revenue is still increasing. It's increasing because the quality of the home is also going up as you're doing this. So your throughput's increased, and the quality of your asset that you're selling is now increased as well because the quality of work is higher. So in summary, basically, like I said, we're not here to do complex. We're here to do simple things that are big ROI. In this case, a simple 3-step system that I set up in less than 90 days that recovered annually $180,000 in rent and increased revenue by $5.5 million. And you saw the results, you saw the graphs, and it's very straightforward, guys. Simple comms, simple systems, simple SOPs. Really, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's the basics. If you do the fundamentals well, anywhere, things get a lot better really fast. So that's what I hope you took from this today. Simple comms, simple systems, simple SOPs. So if you'd like to know more, or you have challenges you'd like to work through, I'd love to hear from you. You can schedule a strategy call on my calendar. There's the link below. Book a call, or you can shoot me an email, or you can call me. I would love to hear from you. I'd like to know if you found this useful or not. And if there's some changes you think could be made, I'd be open to those. But thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time.